Hi, this is Ren.
This is Casey.
And this is All Walks of Film. So we just watched Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. And I gotta say, it was a really great film. I was hoping that I could at least see one good Wonder Woman film this year because, well, quite frankly, I wasn't impressed with the film that came out that everybody else was. I know that we both are in the minority with that one, but we didn't even get another animated movie to tide me over. So we have this, a rather unconventional superhero film that isn't really about superheroes, but it totally is at the same time.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting about it, and we'll get into it when we get into spoilers and what is the movie. But it is nice to have at least one feminist Wonder Woman movie in the current year.
Yeah, and one thing that I was actually really surprised that the movie didn't bring up is the fact that William Marston coined the term feminism, which came up not once in the entire movie.
Yeah, I mean, there is some stuff that's missing from this movie that really should have been there. It's kind of one of the problems of, they're trying to talk about so many different things that not everything fits, and that's kind of a shame. But I will say, it is interesting, that this movie is actually about feminism in both feminism as a movement and feminism in practice in everyday life. B, that it is a feminist take on Wonder Woman, which again is something that the Wonder Model movie didn't do. And C, is it's something that's very true in spirit to what Wonder Woman is. Again, not like the Wonder Model movie. And D, and most importantly, if you're one of those people who supported the Wonder Model movie because, it's directed by a woman and stars a woman and we have to support women in the industry and show that we want more of this material, then you need to buy as many tickets for this movie as you did for the Wonder Woman movie. Because not only if you like Wonder Woman, you'll like this movie because that's what it's about. And it's actually a very, very good movie. I'm not just saying that it was cool. It's actually a very good, interesting, compelling film that's a lot of fun to watch. But more importantly, this was a movie that was actually made by women. It was written and directed by a woman. 5 of the 8 producers were women. Tons of people in the art department and in casting were women. It's not they didn't have men involved in making this film. Of course, men were still instrumental in making this film because this film understands that there is a place in feminism for men, and they exhibited that in their filmmaking practices.
Which is one interesting thing that you don't hear a lot of feminism bring up.
Except for 21st Century Women, which also came out this year.
Right. But, for some of the guys that might be, I guess, afraid of watching this movie, first of all,
don't be. It's great.
It's got threesomes, so if
oh my god. You don't need to entice people to go see a good movie by waving the threesome like a carrot in front of their nose. Come on.
Okay, but hear me out. So the film is about William Marston, the creator of the polygraph machine, the person who coined the term feminism, even though that's not illustrated in the movie at all, and the person who created the titular character, Wonder Woman. This movie is more focused on what inspired Wonder Woman than the character herself. If you're expecting to see a movie mostly about, the industry and how the comics started out and all that kind of stuff, that's not what this movie is. That's probably going to be in the Stan Lee biopic when that eventually comes out. Mm-hmm. And, maybe a Joel Shuster movie about the creation of Superman. Those movies are inevitable to come out. This movie is more focused on this idea of that not a lot of people know about, of mutual polyamory, which is really the main focus of the movie, and how that bleeds into the character of Wonder Woman and how their relationship inspires certain aspects of Wonder Woman and the feminism, and the fact that this isn't just a male fantasy. This isn't just this idea that, oh wow, this guy gets to have two women that love him, which, based on the trailers, I could see somebody going into the movie thinking that it's sort of a male fantasy, even though this movie is directed by a woman, right? Written by women, and all that kind of stuff. And I will say, filmed in a way that is not as titillating as you might expect from this sort of premise, because it's more concerned with how this relationship is important to them, not how to entice the viewers.
I actually kind of don't agree with that as a summary. I think this is a movie that's more about looking back on Wonder Woman in its historical context by using, with creative liberties, the actual life story of Bill and Elizabeth and Olive and their relationship to illustrate how the elements of Wonder Woman that we in our current times look back on and say, oh, that's so unfeminist, or that's so sexist, or that's so upsetting, and looking at how, no, that was actually not only very feminist, but very progressive, very forward-thinking, very liberating and empowering in its time. It's using the morals that the Wonder Woman comics were trying to illustrate, because the debate about, like, what is Wonder Woman about, and how obscene is it, and how feminist versus unfeminist it is it really, has been an argument that's been going on as long as she's been a character. So I think that it was really interesting that this movie takes the real-world implementation of the morals and values shown in the comics to illustrate, like, what she was really about, by showing how it would work in real life.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And there are so many Easter eggs and visual homages to the Wonder Woman comics. Everything from the bracelets, which is actually what Olive wore.
Yeah, she did actually wear those bracelets for many, many years. It's pretty well documented.
And stuff like the cheetah and the invisible plane and all kinds of stuff. It's really clever how they put the Easter eggs in, because I think with some movies they would draw too much attention to it. Whereas, like, this movie, while it does draw attention to those things, I never felt like it was beating you over the head with it.
Right, like the scene where he gets the supposed invisible plane, that, if you don't know what the invisible plane is, that scene makes perfect sense because it fits in a narrative sense.
Yeah, and they don't say in the movie, oh, this is the invisible plane. Yeah, this movie does sort of expect you to know a certain amount about Wonder Woman. So if you're going into the movie raw and don't really know much about the character outside of, I saw the Wonder Woman movie this year, you might be confused by a lot of the things seen, even though, like, Wonder Woman is as iconic a character as either Superman or Batman, but not
or even
as
more so. She's been around longer than Batman, and she was outselling her male counterparts while Bill Marston was writing her.
Right, but from a storytelling standpoint and from, like, media, outside of comics, Wonder Woman hasn't been as prevalent as Batman and Superman, which is not to say that she hasn't been prevalent, because if you look at the Justice League show and other things, unfortunately, outside of one TV show, a couple failed TV shows, and one animated movie, and this new movie that everybody likes that we don't. She is surprisingly not in a lot by herself as far as media is concerned.
Which is really interesting, because one of the things this movie didn't really showcase was how, at the time when she was being proposed as, like, a comic book idea, the big thing was, oh, well, comics about women, they all flop. female superheroes, they don't sell. So she was put into like a lineup, like a comic that has like a bunch of stories about a bunch of different people, and she was put in at the end, but she was still going to do like a solo story arc about her origin before joining the I think it was the Justice Society of America or the Justice League of America. It's not the Justice League as we know it now, but she became so popular that she was selling on her own for a long time. She was carrying her own title because people just wanted more and more and more and more.
One thing that I will say about the Wonder Woman comics, which unfortunately we didn't see with a lot of female characters until much, much later, was this aspect of almost every female comic book character was just a female version of a male counterpart. So you had Supergirl, which is just female Superman. You had, Batgirl, which is just female Batman, and all this kind of stuff. So like, I get the desire for that, but like Wonder Woman was very much her own character and not just a female Superman. Even
though I feel like as the franchises went on, they tried to do that more and more, even though that's not what she was.
Well, I think, unfortunately, some of the elements that they put into this new film is incorporating that, is making her the female super. I mean, you even had a Clark Kent reference in the film, which I get that some people think is cute, but it's like, no, Wonder Woman isn't Superman. Stop trying to make her Superman because she's her own separate character. One thing that I will say is I was really interested but skeptical about the cast at first, mostly because
they prettied everybody up. None of the people in real life were that pretty, including Professor Marston.
Well, yeah. Luke Evans hasn't really been in many movies. He's mostly a TV guy. Like, he was in The Wire. He was in, several different TV shows. But, like, as far as movie stuff, like, he was in Immortals as Zeus. But I was a little skeptical for him as a lead. Rebecca Hall is an actress that I'm really fond of, but outside of Christine, which I still have yet to see, her performance has never really taken a film, even though she's a really good actress. She's not really given a lot of material to work with. I think that this is sort of a springboard for her because she was very much front and center in this film. And, as somebody who's had a crush on her for a very long time, I was very glad to see. Mm-hmm. Bella Heathcote is an actress that I'm not familiar with. She played Olive. And one thing that I really liked about her portrayal is she looks very much like the original Wonder Woman, like very much of her body and all that.
She's got kind of like the square jaw, and she's got kind of like a similar mouth and eyes. But what's really interesting is that unlike Wonder Woman and unlike the real Olive, she's blonde.
Yeah.
Which I get that is definitely a creative liberty to show, like, the opposing image of his wife, between Elizabeth and Olive. I don't want to call Elizabeth his wife because that's not really who she is in the movie. She's, a person in her own right. But it is kind of weird that they chose to just go all out with the blonde thing. I don't know how I feel about that, honestly.
I know this is kind of odd to say, but I really admired the fact that they picked a woman that had a body type that was the ideal of the time. Mm-hmm. Like, her body type isn't like that sleek supermodel body type, nor is it, this kind of fit Hollywood actress look. She very much looks like a woman of her time. Her arms are a little bit flabbier. She's not big at all, but there are certain like curves and all that kind of stuff. I know I'm getting kind of creepy with this, but that are very reminiscent of the time. Like, when she wore that outfit, it was like, holy shit, that looks like Wonder Woman of the time, not like somebody wearing an outfit. And I just thought that was like really brilliant to pick that actress. I think she might have even gained weight for this role to do that.
Yeah.
Which like I just think that was a really good choice. I think they picked somebody who looked very pretty for that time, and which is not to say that she isn't pretty. She's gorgeous. But there was a certain element where it felt that she was of the time and of the look of the time and not just a modern person, which unfortunately Luke Evans and Rebecca Hall did sort of embody, but she definitely didn't.
Mm-hmm. So getting more into what the story is, I guess, there was so much in the movie that is kind of like, you wouldn't believe that it was true, but it was. And then there's so much in the movie where it's just like, why couldn't you have put in more here? And then there's so much that's like, dude, I don't think so. But
one thing that's interesting about the film is it does show sort of the creation of the polygraph machine, which is a very interesting device because to a certain extent it does provide legitimacy, but it's not 100% accuracy. Like, there are certain movements that we make when we lie and when we tell the truth. However, as proven in the later years, there are certain techniques that you can use to bypass it. Specifically, clenching your sphincter, which I know that sounds gross, but like on Penn and Teller, they showed that, and it was a way to like bypass that. And of course, at the time, like, who would think of that?
So kind of like getting more into what is this movie really about, you know, with all spoilers and everything. It's really interesting how this movie is about how it's much less about the movement of feminism, and in fact it has a couple jabs on how like the movement of feminism isn't very beneficial to women in their everyday lives, but it is very contemporary in showing how like there isn't one kind of way to be a feminist, which is something that the movement has been struggling with even to this day. You know, in the movie, it goes very much out of its way to show that what's empowering for one person is not going to be empowering for somebody else. And there's no way to like put these particular like box around it. And they bring out a lot of parts of Diana's character that we look at now and we're like, oh, it's so unfeminist how she's being bound, and it's so like kinky and sexually perverted, and oh, what, she's a secretary? That's like so not progressive enough.
So much so that none of those aspects of her character were incorporated into the newest film.
Yeah, well, they also didn't incorporate her war nurse background. But again, this is all stuff that hasn't been in Rebirth, as far as I know, which I think is also a big part of it, is because stupid Rebirth. But what's interesting is that the movie is taking a lot of these different concepts. Like, there's this really great scene where Olive wants to be bound, and Elizabeth gets upset because she's like, why the fuck would you be okay with that? That's not, you know, what, like, liberation for women means. Why would you ever let a man tie you up? That's so upsetting. But the movie shows that, no, that's what's empowering for her, and that's what works for her, because she is not being put down or degraded by it. And there were a lot of parts like that. Like, Olive is a housewife, but Elizabeth is the one who has a job and supports the family. Because in real life, yes, Elizabeth was the one who supported Bill financially because Bill couldn't hold down a job. I'm not saying he was a deadbeat. It's just he legitimately could not hold on to a job.
And part of that might have been because being a man at that time, being in a polyamorous relationship,
oh, of course,
could hinder your placement in society. Also, the fact that his statements on women would be considered vastly unpopular, and he'd be looked down on by lots of men at his time.
Yeah, it is really interesting looking at his thoughts on women, because he does say a lot of things that were brought up in this movie. Like, oh, women would be much better at ruling than men. Women are more loving, more caring, they're better at inducement. In the next 100 years, there's going to be an American matriarchy. Women are going to run the economy, women are going to run politics, and they're going to be better at it than men are. He was very much not of a, like, we need equality. He was very much of a, I would prefer if women were just in charge of everything kind of a guy. And it is really interesting how much the movie was not shying away from those thoughts at all, and showing how he was very much a proponent of women are as strong as men. Women are as capable as men. You know, they're as capable as Wonder Woman. You know, these were all things he was really pushing for. And something that was kind of interesting that was brought up a little bit in the movie, but I don't know if it was sort of blunt enough for a lot of people to get, was Wonder Woman was not actually targeted towards women. It was Marston had written Wonder Woman comics as a way to talk to a male audience about feminism. Which is why I really like this movie, is this movie is very much about men's place in feminism, because it shouldn't be an exclusionary movement.
Well, yeah, and one thing that a lot of people nowadays, there's a big movement against feminism because much of it now is of the mindset of female superiority, female isolation from men, and oftentimes trying to put things in a context that don't exactly fit our modern times. They're trying to incorporate the ideas of early feminism into modern times, and like any sort of ideology, it needs to evolve with the time. And unfortunately, it seems that a lot of feminists didn't look towards a future where men and women had things more equal. And so this idea that men and women are together oftentimes does not come up. Most of the writings about men in feminism are very monstrous, very degrading as far as intellect goes, because there's a lot of writing that basically says that men are stupid and only think with their dick. And, you know, all they want to do is fight all the time. All they want to do is have their dominance over women.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this whole concept of like patriarchy and all that kind of stuff feeds into that as far as that ideology goes. And I think that, at least in this movie, that they're trying to address that. Perhaps another idea of feminism is a more mutual relationship between men and women, which is something I don't often see in media, literature, or anything. One of the things that I love about a book that I read a couple years ago called Jane Eyre was the fact that it was a mutual relationship. I like the fact that while on the surface you could look at the relationship and go, oh, lucky guy, but it's much more complicated than that, because, you know, they are all in love with each other. It's not just this lucky guy and two hot babes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's very much what the movie's about, but that's very much what the original comics were about, because Marston was using Wonder Woman comics as a way to talk to boys about how to have respect for women, how to, you know, he was trying to illustrate to boys that women are strong, women are independent, women are able to do whatever they want. Not to the point of excluding men, or like women won't be interested in relationships with men or anything, which was another interesting thing in this movie that I liked was, there's this idea in feminism that's still very pervasive of, if you're a strong, independent feminist woman, you're not going to put your man first. And this movie and the comics, you know, in defense of the comics, is saying, like, no, love and happiness is also important. And if you are in a loving relationship with a man, there's no reason why that cannot be a priority in your life. Like, one of the things that they bring up in the comics is how Diana becomes the secretary in order to be close to Steve Trevor. oh, that's so, unfeminist that she's changing her life for this man. She was a secretary in the military so she could be, still a part of the war effort. And also be close to Steve because she loves him and they're together in a relationship. Like,
and was trying to be realistic.
I don't think that they were in a relationship actually in the comics, but in the movie you can see like the women are trying to put love first, even though in this case it's not a woman doing it for a man. It's obviously more complicated, but that's not something that's just like, oh, we need to disregard that notion in a contemporary idea of feminism. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah, but also trying to be realistic to the times, because realistically, a woman at that time wouldn't be put in such a high place, wouldn't be put into combat and all that kind of stuff. Granted, you might say that, like, if Wonder Woman took place in a different country, she might be actually part of the war effort, like, the Russian women.
Well, that was part of the reason why Wonder Woman was so popular, is because at the time she was the one comic that wasn't going away from the war effort. Like, there were other comic book characters at that time who would they would have an episode that was kind of about World War II or something, but with Wonder Woman that was just consistently a part of the story and a part of what she was doing and a part of their adventures. They would just keep coming back around to what's going on in the war effort right now, and that's a big part of what made her so insanely popular.
I will say that one thing that I would have liked the film to get into, I mean, there are many things that we would like to see expanded on, but a movie can only be so long and focus on so many things before it just becomes a convoluted mess. But Wonder Woman is incredibly jingoistic, and for DC Comics, it's kind of strange. Now, Marvel has always been jingoistic, always been America, rah, rah, rah. But DC, I mean, you could argue Superman to a large extent, but nothing about his costume screams America like Wonder Woman's costume, especially her early iterations.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that comes back to Marston's involvement in World War I, actually, because he was a psychologist. He became a second lieutenant as a psychologist in World War I, and I think that's something that really stuck with him and is part of why Wonder Woman is so involved in the war effort, is because I think that's where he saw a lot of the darkness in humanity that he wants Wonder Woman as an idea and a symbol to be combating.
Yeah, and also, that being said, if you're going to try to retroactively change Wonder Woman to take place during World War I, it would have been interesting if you had incorporated some of the aspects of Professor Marston's wartime life into the film. If you're going to do that.
Yeah, that would kind of make sense. That would be really cute if, there was a cameo of Marston in the movie or something, but maybe that would have been too much. The one thing I wish that the movie had done more of is the movie talked a lot about how bondage isn't a form of degradation. Being tied up isn't really about suffering or about domination or about pain. And they try to emulate it without words, but I think it was kind of a missed opportunity that, the movie is set up to be about Marston having a conversation, a review of his comic with the children board advisory. I think her name was Josette Frank in real life. And you miss that opportunity to talk about his thoughts on bondage in comics, because it's really fascinating how at the time there was a big to-do about the violence in comics that has never gone away, but it was there at the time where it's oh, it's going to teach children that, violence is just fun, and Marston had written extensively under his real name in a psychological magazine directed at women. He wrote a lot of studies about how many people read comics and how the children read comics, but then the parents also enjoy reading comics, and we should use comics as a method to instill good values in our children and to educate them on, on social practices and norms. And he pitched bondage as an alternative to violence because the way he says it, and I'm not saying I agree with this, especially not in a contemporary sense, but the way he put it was, when somebody's in bondage, they're not being embarrassed and they're not being shown as being inferior. And visually showing somebody in bondage is a good way to create conflict without having physical violence. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt because while he was a writer for Wonder Woman, there was like a lot of violence that happened later in his 2-year run that was like pretty explicit, but was also pitched in a very anti-violent Mad Max Fury Road kind of style way. But I thought that it was kind of odd how the movie didn't verbally put that defense for the bondage, especially because there is like this whole like the kinky nature of the bondage in Wonder Woman montage thing that was very cute, but had to repeat like a lot of images because there's not that much to draw from in like 2 years of comics. They had to repeat like every image, I think 5 or 6 times. It was a little ridiculous, but I thought that it was really weird that they didn't give like a full explanation of how he used bondage to just be visually a lot more interesting, but then to also teach children not to enjoy suffering. And he would talk about how like it's not actually sadistic because they're not being hurt while they're being tied up. But then later he started showing like women who enjoyed being in bondage, and he started writing all this stuff about how women are freed when they're tied up in bondage and how women actually enjoy the empowerment of like being put in chains, which is why in his comics when they go to Paradise Island you see women who like are begging to be put in chains and stuff. I think that it was a little weird that the movie, I appreciated that they were trying to show a lot of that, but I thought it was a failed opportunity to not like include some quotes from him in those interviews.
Well, I do think it's also a failed opportunity to not include the fact that while you visually saw that it was both women and men in bondage, that the movie never got into the men in bondage aspect either. Mm-hmm. Because
that's a good point.
It is really interesting how you could argue, and the movie seems to argue that quite obviously, almost to the point where it was like a little too obvious for me, was the fact that Rebecca Hall as Elizabeth wore the pants in the relationship.
Yeah, I don't really agree, but okay. I thought the pants were nice, especially because that was so rebellious at the time to have women wear pants. But
and it's probably accurate. It was just like one of those things where it was like, oh yeah, that concept. Mm-hmm. I did think it was interesting that there was never a conversation among other men that Marston had about his relationship outside of that fight. Like, some guys going like, I don't think, women should be in this sort of thing, because
I think it's the same problem that there was with the Wonder Model movie where like in a contemporary sense, we don't want to bring up the same old story we've seen so much about, like, women of the time were told that they couldn't wear pants, They did that a lot with, like, her law degree, which was really interesting and is also, a big part of her actual life story. And but I think that they were just kind of like, we don't need to have a conversation about the pants.
Right. I could get maybe having a conversation with, picking up Marston for the fact that, like, his wife makes the money, like, what do you do for your wife, all that kind of stuff. Maybe somebody even saying, like, is it the reason why you admire women so much is because they do all this stuff for you and you can't do something for them?
That's true, but the movie didn't really, except for the fight with the neighbors, didn't really do a whole lot to talk about society. A lot of it was really just focused on their relationship and how they talked to one another and what they thought about one another. Well, there was the whole thing with the boyfriend a little bit, but even they didn't really get into it.
Yeah, I do think it's really interesting that like we now have a movie about consensual polyamory, which at least to my knowledge, even among independent films, I haven't really seen.
Yeah, a lot of our like mainstream exposure to polyamory in media is, it's all alternative religious stuff where it's like, oh, they're Amish or they're Mormon, and it's a patriarchy where
well, that's
a man
polygamy.
is...
That's a little bit different. Yeah, that's you're talking about like.
Well, no, you're right, but that is kind of what a lot of people think of. This is sort of like the mainstream idea is like the man's in charge and he's at the center of it and he has his harem of women and they all just don't like each other because they all like him too much and there's all this friction. Whereas in this movie, like, it was very much a sort of guide of how to do polyamory well in having open, consensual, three-way relationships. There's no, like, these people love each other more than these people, or, like, these people are really, the couple and there's a third wheel, which is sometimes a relationship, if that's what you agree on. There's nothing wrong with that, but it was really interesting to see, like, especially when they're talking about the kids. Oh, you're both the parents. Yeah.
Yeah, which we got a little glimpse of in the second season of American Horror Story for a brief period of time. But so far, that's about it. Sometimes we see it in, like, hippie culture, like, if you really look into it, which I think's interesting that we did have that conversation, like, right after the film. It's like, oh, isn't it interesting that the people that would be adults at the time that Wonder Woman came out...
No, the children who were reading Wonder Woman when Marston was the writer would have been adults in the 1960s.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting.
But going back to the polyamory, I really like that was at the heart of the story because a lot of the sort of revulsion to the original ideas in Wonder Woman are coming from a contemporary lens of like, oh, that's not what progressivism looks like, having a woman in bondage, Even though a lot of that is just, well, that's your hang up. You don't like that. That's fine, but that doesn't inherently make it sexist. And they picked the most taboo element that they could have because, let's face it, we're at a time where dressing up in costumes and tying each other up and being sexual, like, quote unquote, sexually perverse. It's not especially that shocking. It's not.
Right, but at the time, lesbianism was considered extremely taboo.
Of course, but this is a movie coming out now.
Right.
And the most taboo element of their relationship now would be the polyamory. And showing that something that instinctively makes so many people say, no, 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 I can't even imagine, no way. And showing that that is legitimately a loving, caring relationship that's every bit as put together as any monogamous couple, any heterosexual couple, any homosexual couple, and putting so much energy in having real chemistry and emotion and showing that they are really a great fit together. Like, at a certain point, you're like, oh, I can't even imagine them not being together because they work so well as a family, the three of them, and really trying to, like, not normalize, obviously, but naturalize that concept in a really beautiful, emotional, genuine way, I think was the strongest part of the movie.
Yeah.
And I love that that's really what the focus was about. Because I'm not polyamorous. I know myself to know that I can't handle a relationship with two people at once. But if, like in this movie, it's open and honest and caring, there's nothing wrong with that idea. But even still, we do have a cultural no button on that. And it was really nice to see a loving example of that.
There are many different aspects. I mean, swinging is one thing, but
even that tends to be deviant. That still tends to be, even when you see swinging in TV shows and movies, a lot of times it's still somewhat disturbing because the person that is being introduced into the relationship usually doesn't really like what's going on, or usually there's sort of an undertone of some sort of like emotional abuse.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the movie The Ice Storm, there's a very strong emphasis on key parties and how taboo that was.
And another thing too is like the movie doesn't shy away from like, oh, of course polyamorous relationships have flaws and, you know, people are imperfect and no relationship is, you know, ideal, but they were all kind of the same problems you have in normal monogamous relationships. I will say like there were a couple other things I really wish were in the movie more. One is I wish that they kind of got more into Charles Marston's life. And, well, actually Elizabeth Marston too. Like, they got into it a little bit how she didn't want to graduate from Harvard because Harvard had a separate law school. And it was like, lovely law for ladies. And she was like, no, fuck that. I'm going to go to Boston University and hang out with politicians. I'm going to actually, you know, mingle with the people I want to work with. And I kind of was hoping that would be in the movie, but the movie said a little bit after that. But I wish they had kind of gone into more of Bill Marston. I think I keep calling him Charles Marston because his pseudonym was Charles Moulton. His sort of failures and successes and failures again, because he couldn't hold down a job as a professor, but a lot of people don't realize he worked as a creative consultant for Universal for a little while, and it would have been really interesting to see like any of that, but that didn't really make an appearance. And then they sort of touched on how the lie detector test wasn't very popular and it was being discredited as like being used in science, but I thought that there was going to be a lot more stuff about his experimentation with the lie detector and then how he was using it more for commercial gain, even though like Olive said like, oh, let's use it for like commercialism, and they were like, that's a great idea, but then they don't show like you can even see advertisements for shaving razors that are using a polygraph to show how men are emotionally agitated when they use a terrible razor, or how they did like love counseling, which I thought was really going to come up because they had that whole scene with Bill and Elizabeth and Olive, and they were talking about their emotions on the lie detector and how that actually brought them more together even though they were lying in front of each other. And that was like a real thing that he did for a while, was he did like love counseling with couples with the lie detector. And then we didn't see any of that either because they had to make room for the baby parties because, again, that's something that they showed in the comics, so they kind of had to have the real world explanation of what the fuck was the baby party thing about.
Well, I think what you're proposing is, you know, it's possible that this could be something extended to like a TV series or something like that. That could be interesting.
I would love that. But like kind of more of what I'm thinking is like I would have loved to see something a little bit more, and this is the only way I'm going to say this in a positive way towards La La Land. A little bit more La La Land where you really feel embarrassed for Seb when he has like these big professional failures. I was expecting more of that because that was like such a part of his life leading into him getting into the comic book industry. Yeah,
I will say that I was a little disappointed that seeing the Wonder Woman comics burned didn't have the dramatic weight that you were expecting from the beginning.
It also didn't have a narrative reason in the context of the movie for why the burnings were happening. They didn't explain a lot of the stuff with like what the review was and what the big controversy was of the time and why there were big burning parties and what was going on after it was like such a big success for a while.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie that to a certain extent demands you do homework because it's not giving you vital information that you need for some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing too is because the family element was so important to the movie, I'm always really wary in movies where it's a family and they have kids and the kids are just kind of like props in the movie. And that's definitely what was happening here. But what was really interesting is a couple of the kids were paid to be writers for Wonder Woman. Some of the kids gave interviews when they were older talking about how like their dad would give them $25 if they could come up with a good idea for a Wonder Woman episode, or if like they did really intricate writing, maybe they could get $100 for working on these episodes.
That's a lot of money back then.
Yeah, like that's crazy. And it would have been great to see, it was really nice seeing the parents all involved in the creation of Wonder Woman, but it would have been really nice to see the kids, especially because they just that Frank brought up this whole thing of like, would you let your children read it? Your little girl? They were all reading it. They were all contributing to making it. It would have been really nice if, like, he brings up the whole, like, don't bring my family into this, if there was more proof that it's not because he was embarrassed to let his kids see it. Because that's how that scene plays off, when they're like, oh, would you let your children read it? He's like, don't talk about my family. It sounds like he's saying he is embarrassed. When he was, like, that's not what the situation was in real life, and I think it would have helped to show that there isn't anything unnatural about it if you had more with the kids. Like, the kids clearly call them both mom. There's a lot of stuff where it's like, the kids clearly are happy and healthy and don't mind having 3 parents. It's fine. But if you had shown, like, them being more cognitive of creating a lot of these storylines that were being marketed at children, I think that would have been a lot more interesting than what we got, which was just, they had some kids. One of them got hit in the eye one time.
Well, I will say that it definitely does lead to interesting places that you could go for films after this, to not just go back to this, but to like expand, and maybe not a film, just like, a documentary or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think this would have been like a really phenomenal little mini series or something. It probably would have gotten, like, there is some problems with the idea of marketing this movie. Like I said, anyone who likes the Wonder Model movie should see this movie at least as many times, but obviously it's about taboo topics. You're not going to bring little kids to come see, like, sex scenes.
Even though, like, it was very, very, very tame.
It's not necessarily that it was tame, but it was very tasteful and very unexploitative.
Yeah, well, it was directed by a woman, and, like, one thing that I can always tell when watching a movie is when a sex scene is directed by a woman and when a sex scene is directed by a man. There's usually a huge difference because men are more visual and women are often more about the experience. Marston was a little bit different, and some guys are different as well. But it is interesting seeing that comparison in films, like when a sex scene is actually shown, how it's treated.
Mm-hmm. I know there's probably going to be some stuff about this movie about historical inaccuracies, and a lot of that does boil down to just how much do we know and how much can we actually verify. Like, one of the things is there's a story about how Wonder Woman was originally a male character, and Elizabeth is the one who told Bill that it should be a woman. And that's based off of Elizabeth herself saying that when I think she was 99. And Bill had already been dead for some time. But there's not really any real verification for that, which is why I think they didn't include that in the movie. I don't know if I would have preferred there to be more ambiguity about, like, how they made it. I don't know if that was really necessary, but there's going to be some people who are like that, or some people who are going to be really upset about the fact that Olive is a blonde when she's not really blonde, There are definitely a lot of creative licenses in order to tell a time period story in a contemporary way, and in order to do as much as they want to do in the time allotted. But I think at the heart of it, a lot of the character building that happened in the movie was really interesting, and I love the idea of taking the values of Wonder Woman and applying them in real-life situations. And the other big thing that's going to come up is glossing over a lot of the racist elements, like, because this movie kind of pretended like a lot of the more racist shit that he was writing. We're not going to mention that. Because a lot of stuff was racist in the 1940s. And that is definitely one of those top things where you look back at the original comics and from a contemporary perspective, you're just like, oh, that's not okay. You know, and they just kind of did the beguiled Doctor Strange thing of just, oh, yeah, there's this, the racist topic, we'll just ignore it and that'll make it better. And it's just kind of like, okay, but they're trying to do so much. But I don't know how you could have addressed that in a constructive way in the movie, honestly. That's really the big thing about that. That's why that's not on my list of what I wish was in the movie. It's just because I don't know how you could have done that constructively.
Right, because then that creates a much more nuanced film where, you know, you have the good and the bad. I kind of was hoping that you had a little bit of that with the polygraph, because look at how many people have been convicted off of a machine that isn't all that accurate.
Yeah, but that is one of those weird things, because, like, in his time, it was discredited. He didn't know that. He was, from what I understand, he was trying to create a lie detector test as a tool for the military to be used in interrogation to avoid, like, he talks about this a little bit, how he wants, like, love and peace and understanding in order to deter war from happening. That's why he wants more of a matriarchal system, is because he is so opposed to, like, war efforts. And that was, from my understanding, what the lie detector test was all about. It was supposed to be used as a tool to help deter war tactics and military action. But even in the movie, like, they show, like, what happened with the lie detector over the course of history was so far out of his hands.
All right, so this is just a little footnote because I didn't reveal this information to Kira before.
Oh my god, it is true! So the writer and director for this did one of my favorite movies from my childhood, which is going to sound very weird to a lot of people because most of the people who saw this weren't children. But one of my favorite guilty pleasure spy parody movies ever is the movie Debs. That's where my massive crush from Deb and Aoki comes from. And it was like, it was a movie, and this is gonna sound really bad, but I promise it's good. It's really good. It's a movie about, like, these women who go to spy school, and they wear, like, sexy schoolgirl uniforms, and one of them falls in love with the villain who's creating a death ray to destroy the world. And of course the big thing is that they're both women. I don't know if I would like it that much as an adult, but when I was a kid, I loved that shit. I can't believe this was made by the same person. It makes me so happy.
Her only other film credit is Herbie Fully Loaded.
It's a really, really good movie. Oh, that makes me so happy because I didn't know going into it that it was the same director.
Would you have been more excited to see it if I had told you that?
Yeah, I would have.
Okay.
Because Debs is still just like, I have the nostalgia goggles for it.
So what did you think of the film? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for listening.